All right, today we are diving into a really powerful philosophy on human freedom. This comes straight from the core values of the Center for Market Education, and it's all about connecting these huge societal ideas with the super personal journey of what it even means to be human.
So let's just start with the biggest question of all, right? The one that frames this entire conversation. What does it truly mean to be free? It sounds so simple, but the answer we're about to unpack is, well, it's way more nuanced and profound than you might think. Okay, here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to redefine what liberty is. Then, we'll get into this fascinating concept called the personal equation. After that, we'll see how you turn potential into reality, what kind of environment that needs, and finally, what the proper role of policy is in all of this. Let's get into it.
First up, redefining liberty. Look, before we can even talk about why it's so important, we have to get on the same page about what it is we're actually talking about, and just as critical, what we're not talking about.
So at its heart, the Center for Market Education views individual liberty as this supreme, totally non-negotiable value. But notice this deep connection being made here. Liberty isn't just some abstract political idea. It's apparently rooted in our very nature as humans, as beings who act, who choose, who create meaning. And the main stage where all this action happens? A free market system.
Now, let's clear up some common mix-ups right away. Defending liberty doesn't mean you have to blindly support every single thing that gets labeled a civil right. Why? Because sometimes when you frame something as a right, it can actually become a claim on someone else's choices or their property, which, you guessed it, can end up shrinking liberty instead of growing it.
And here's another big one. A free market is not the same thing as consumerism. Not at all. The market is just a process, it's a tool. It simply reflects the values of the people in it. It doesn't force anyone to adopt a value of just buying more and more stuff.
This idea of liberty is also seen as a universal concept. It's not about trying to copy a specific country or culture. The principles of freedom and a market economy, they're meant to transcend any single nation's history, because they're based on a fundamental idea of what it means to be a person.
And this brings us to a really central point. You just can't pull civil and economic freedom apart. Trying to do that, well, it's like artificially chopping a person's life in half. I mean, think about it. So many of our biggest life choices, from our career to our passions, they're economic choices. If you restrict that, you're not just messing with economics. You're restricting our ability to be a whole person.
Okay, so we've been talking big picture. Now let's zoom all the way in and see how this grand philosophy becomes something incredibly personal. We're shifting from the abstract concept to you, the individual, and your one-of-a-kind journey.
I just love this metaphor, the personal equation. The idea is that every single one of us has this completely unique mix of talents, dreams, experiences, and potential. Your personal equation is this puzzle that only you can solve over the course of your life. It's really the core of who you are. So if life is about solving this personal equation, how does that actually happen? How does it work? Let's dig into that journey of turning potential into reality, the journey from who you could be to who you actually are.
This line of thinking actually goes way, way back to Aristotle. He saw life as this movement from dynamis, that's all our latent potential, all the things we could be, to energia, which is our actual, lived-out reality. And what's the bridge between those two? It's the journey itself, a messy, unpredictable path of trying things, failing, learning, and discovering. It's this constant, dynamic process of becoming.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This journey, it isn't just about you. As each of us tries to solve our own personal equation, chasing a passion, building a business, creating art, we unintentionally create massive value for everybody else. It turns out that individual flourishing is the engine of social progress.
But of course, this journey of self-realization, it can't happen in a vacuum. It needs a very particular kind of environment to thrive. So what does this necessary free space actually look like?
A free space is not chaos, not even close. It's actually a space that's structured by stable institutions, things like the rule of law, social norms, and shared traditions. These things give us predictability. They give us a stable ground to stand on so our actions can have meaning. They're not the enemies of liberty, they're the necessary foundation for it.
And this leads to a really critical distinction. We need what you could call institutional embeddedness, a structured order, like guardrails on a highway, that gives us a predictable framework. What we have to reject is institutional suffocation. That's the top-down, centrally planned control that dictates our choices and completely smothers any chance we have of solving our own personal equation. This just hammers home that essential connection we talked about earlier. A so-called free space that crushes economic choice is a total contradiction. When you can't freely produce or trade or innovate, it isn't just your bank account that's being squeezed. Your very ability to pursue your potential, your entire existential journey is being crippled.
Okay, so if we're all on this personal journey within a free space, what's the role of government and public policy in all this? Let's put the final piece of the puzzle into place.
In this view, the role of policy is actually pretty modest, but it's incredibly important. It's not about designing society from the top down or telling people the right way to live. It's really about being a guardian. The job is simply to protect the conditions for freedom, and this is key, to get out of the way by removing barriers that stop people from innovating and working together voluntarily.
So you can boil it all down to this. The goal of policy isn't to engineer some perfect outcome for a society. It's more like a subtle, humble art form, the art of just safeguarding openness, making sure that that space of possibilities stays open for everyone.
So, to bring it all home, this is why liberty is seen as so fundamental. It's not just a political preference. It's a principle that reflects our deepest nature as creative beings who are on a constant journey of becoming, of turning our potential into reality. And I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If the proper role of policy is just to protect the playing field, well, then the ultimate responsibility for the journey, that falls squarely on each of us. So the question stops being philosophical and becomes intensely personal. Who is responsible for solving your personal equation? Thanks for watching.